Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Me again this week, bringing you another guest gifts. And I am joined by Sarah, without an H, and Lizzie to talk about their favourite episodes, what they might be learning, even what they might be using for themselves, and probably a whole lot of other stuff too. So what's the connection to knowing them? The simplest route might be to say my brother, and yet that would merely be the start. I also know them as leaders, creators of beautiful little people, parents, and above all, monumental multitaskers. I wonder what they might tell us about living as a multitasker and how they feel about it. Come and join me as I hang out with plate spinning Poppets. Ladies, good afternoon.
Wow.
What are you laughing about?
Our new titles, I think.
I'd written down multitasking mavens, and then I thought, no, they're not witches. No, that's no good. They're very knowledgeable. Maven, of course, is very knowledgeable, wise people as well. But you are Poppets. I mean, you're young, so much younger than me, fresh. You are creators of beautiful little people. There's all sorts of other ways that I actually know you, other than through my dastardly little bro. So, yeah, I think that I would love to hear you bringing all that you are, because you are so much, into this conversation today. So the first thing I get you to do, because I have only introduced you as Sarah without an H, very important, and Lizzie. So I'm going to give you the opportunity, as you know, without using your job title, to tell me who you really are. And I'm going to let you off the hook first off, Madame Scott, and let Lizzie go first on this occasion. It might not carry on like that.
Right, I'll take it then. Thank you, Bobby. And hi, Sarah. It's nice to see you both. Well, monumental plate spinners. I think dinner services, they're spinning at 10 miles an hour, well, a million miles an hour, really. This challenge of describing ourselves without job titles is actually quite hard. So I did think about it quite a lot, you'll be pleased to hear. And I would say that I would describe myself as a cheerleader. So I love cheering on and championing good people, whether or not that is at work, whether they're your mates, the children in your family. For me, supporting somebody and passing on any opportunities for them to shine is really important. I would say that I am emotionally driven. I know that that can often have quite negative connotations to some because, we should all be, in charge of our emotions and logically driven. But I looked into this quite a lot from a work point as well, and emotions help us drive decision making, and I think that they are kind of not given as much credibility and in the workplace sometimes as having that. So I would say I am emotionally driven. If we were doing colours, I'm pretty much all yellow and red. So I think that's probably some of the episodes that I've listened to from you, Bobby and Bridge, have been talking about that. And then we've got the list, of mum of three, daughter, wife, friend, active, multitasker, which is a concept I want to unpack with everyone because I think multitasking is often quite a tough one to do. And I try and do too much and then end up not doing anything very well. So I've gone back to uni-tasking, which is something that is a nice concept. So doing one thing at a time, but getting it done. So
Absolutely.
That is me.
Lovely. That is a very great start. Thank you very much, Lizzie. I love the fact we'll get into red and yellow and which comes first or which comes when as well. I think that's interesting. And I equally love the emotionally driven because I've made a lifetime out of it and there is absolutely space for that everywhere. So people need to get with the program. Sarah, my love, your turn.
I really loved what you said, Lizzie, about uni-tasking, so we might have to come back to that as well. I also thought about it, and probably at the heart of who I am is a people person. And for me, loyalty and passion is quite important. So that probably sits quite nicely or similarly with your emotionally driven piece. I definitely put a lot of energy into the things that I believe strongly in, and I do believe strongly and passionately about them. I would say that in work and in life, I'm probably a creative problem solver. So I do like the creativity, and I need to build more of that into what I do, because it is actually something that I think I can do quite well, and I enjoy. But I'm also quite action orientated. So we've used a disc model in my workplace, and so I'm very much sitting in that D space as an action driven person. So it is always with this sort of energy around solving the problem, but working with people to do so, and that kind of thing. Similarly, I'll run through the list of being a daughter, a wife, a mother to two lovely girls, and then my day job, which does filter into it, is as an in-house lawyer. I also co-lead the women female ERG at work, and I have in the past sort of been on boards of trustees for military wives choirs and other ERG organisations.
Marvellous. Of course, you forgot, young lady, sister and sister-in-law. I mean,
Yes,
just
that too.
just saying.
Just that too.
I thought you might lead with that, but clearly
Yes.
not.
Maybe not quite so there with the emotional intelligence to have got that bit right.
It's okay. That was very red of me to actually say that. I think that it sounds like there's going to be quite a lot of that blend of red and yellow going on here, because equally, I think in one of the episodes I talked about the fact that I used to be off the scale red, and then the more I've got into coaching and my own self-awareness, there's much more yellow. But boy, if I am pushed, I can be absolutely scarlet, and right up at the top right end of elements to it. But I like to think of myself as orange.
Yeah,
not
it's
in
quite
skin
hard,
tone.
isn't it? To be
It
like
is, but
like be one or the other. And I think,
yeah. Well, it's
it's
like
a
any.
spectrum, isn't it? And
Of course, it is.
it depends on what the environment is that comes out of it. And, we often talk about being one thing at work and one thing at home. And, it's that flick between, I can be super red and like we're doing it and we're doing it this way, or very much, happy and
Come on,
yellow,
everyone.
and doing it
Yeah.
that way. But one thing I really am not is detail orientated. That's not a natural state for me. And so I have to work super hard at paying the attention to detail, making sure you factor in that time. And it's an awareness, but I find it quite interesting. It's that different scales bring you out on different things. And there was one of your episodes, Bobby, that was talking about a sparkling introvert. And I listened to that and I was like, yeah, I've got it. This ambivert.
Ambiverts.
It sounds very exotic.
I think so, which is why I want to be one.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to it and I was like, yes, this is speaking to me. This is interesting.
Well, and I do want. So there's a couple of things there. There is the fact that the belief we're never one thing. That's why I get whilst we can say yeah I'm a red or yeah I'm a yellow, we're never just one thing. Hence the multifaceted nature. Accepting all of what we are. And yeah, sometimes one thing goes up higher in colour than something else does, or an emotion goes up higher than something else. But we're never just linear from that perspective. And I'm also interested, and one of the reasons I wanted to have both of you lovelies on at the same time is that there is that element of integration, of not needing to be something entirely different at work than you are at home, or vice versa, and how exhausting it can be if you feel you have to be something which doesn't quite fit you, if that makes sense, because that's the belonging rather than the fitting in element. And I think that we wanted to talk about uni-tasking, and we wanted to talk about how you are both at home and both at work, maybe as one of the elements. But I'm intrigued by that and how that might fit for both of you.
Before we talk about doing that, one thing that struck me just as we were talking about the kind of colours and how we bring the way we are to the table, and whether that is you can be with your coaching side, bring people along and want to sit with that yellow piece, but actually you still have that deep set desire to achieve things and get actions done and to move forward and not just sit in a discussion that goes in a circular motion with no actual output. A lot of my focus and what I want to do, I've recently taken on a team who are brilliant, and we've got a really diverse set of quite a big team, but part of the things that I feel strongly about and that are the actions I want to drive are people related actions, because that's where the passion sits. So it is about the recognition and the taking the time and the investing in the people, which is a different set of actions to what somebody else that might be sitting in a red sort of D space that is very business target focused will focus on. But I think that can also be how you can blend from one space to the other. And interestingly, just earlier on today, we had a celebration lunch from our ERG network, and we got given a book to say thank you. And it's a
ERG, is that
our employee resource group. So it's our women's
Lovely.
network at work. And we were given a book to say, sort of, thank you for the effort for the year. And it's a Simon Sinek one that I haven't read yet, but I look forward to reading. And on the back, the quote, which several people pointed out, it says, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion.
Oh, I
So
love
true,
that.
isn't it?
And I like
Although
that.
here she goes. So she didn't mention sister-in-law, and now she nabs being the person that gives the quote on the podcast. I mean, what the hell is going on?
Oh, Bobby. Should have had a due diligence here.
Yeah, never work with children, animals, or relatives. Clearly,
So true though. This whole
It
thing, like,
is.
how many times have you been absolutely heads into a project or into an event or something that's going on, and the time goes and you come out and you are flying high, and then there are other times when you're sat there and it is like the minutes feel like weeks, and that's the thing. And I've been reading some stuff around it, and it's around, your bound nature and your free flow. If it's something that you are in a good place in your mind and in your approach to how you're looking at a task or a situation, and it aligns with your values and your principles, and it talks to who you are, you're in your free flow state, and things happen and it doesn't feel like hard work. And yet if you're trying to do something and it's just feeling painful, it's not, to me, lining up with what makes you tick. And it's that deep rooted, this is who I am and this is what I do. And you can really tell that. And it just talks to your points there around, if it's stressful and it's hard work, then yuck, not going to do it. But if it's actually aligning to who you are and your purpose and your values, then go for it all day long. And it's an infectious kind of approach, because it's motivating and you want to be around these people who are like radiators. I would say you both ladies are radiators. You attract amazing things, rather than, we've all been in a room where someone whose personality just doesn't click with yours, or everything is half empty and it's a problem, and it's like you come out and you think, oh my God, I feel like life's been sucked out of me. It's just, but that person might be in a different environment, an absolute hoot, but it just isn't that free flow state.
I think the free flow state as well, we're talking here a lot about a good juicy amount of self-awareness as to who you which is why it was so easy for both of you to articulate who you are without, but equally Sarah very much so with some of the stuff you were saying, quite how much community means to you, whatever that might look like, because that defines, you're being able to share what your value is as well with the women's group at work and Military Wives Choir, etc. But it is that free flow state about knowing who you really are. And I think that when it comes to being in a place where you're feeling the stress, the self-awareness also then helps you with, why am I stressed about this? Is it about an alignment of values? Is it about the way that things have been directed to you? Because in actual fact, for me these days, I agree with you, Sarah, that I feel like I get more direction with my redness the more I'm around other people that I've brought them with me. I'm not this lone wolf anymore that goes right and off I go. But where I go scarlet is when other people have decided to dictate to me without that bringing me with them, if they don't take account of the yellow nature of how that can bring people with them, but just basically say, the JFDI state, I'm more likely to go red. And what that is action oriented against,
Is that something
going
that
off
you
in
just,
entirely.
it's just the principle of someone has acted in
It
a
is.
way that is an overbearing my way or the
Yeah.
highway, and that just is like super annoying and just doesn't work for you?
Yeah.
Because, and it is just that approach, isn't it? Like if someone comes in, it's like, right, this is it. It's like, complete clarity, right? That's happening. And you think, oh my Lord, not everyone will get behind that vision, and
Well,
leave them there.
there's different ways of doing things, but I think that's where I like Sarah's view of how you can make yourself collectively orange, so both bits work. The nice blend. I think it's a nice way of having it.
It's an amazing thing as well. Sarah, you must find it with the teams as well that you're building. Not everyone is the same. And sometimes it's really hard to recruit out of what you like, So my natural leaning is towards people who are of a particular way, but actually that encouraging that diversity of approach and thought and breadth of different types of people and different approaches just helps beyond measure. Like it's an obvious thing to say, isn't it? And of course that's what we want to do. And I've got a lovely team at work, and we all have very different views about how we do things.
So one of the things that I think is interesting too is that we talk about knowing yourself, and that's really important. But I think if you know your team as well, that is how you then also take them with you, and you look at how we've described ourselves and the things that we're good at and the things that inspire us and make us passionate. And you talk about the flow, and actually we had a session on neurodiversity. We were talking about people with ADHD and when that they get into hyper focus if it's something they're interested in. If they're not interested at all and they're bored, they actually cannot compute. But if you know your people well enough, and it's not, if you just from a neurodiverse perspective, and I was saying this yesterday, anybody, you want to know what their strengths are, what they like, where they really do get into that flow, and then you use that. But if you don't know yourself and you don't invest the time to know your team, then you're not really bringing people with you and you're not using them in the best way.
It used to be very much leaders were red and loud and up there and at the front and don't ever show weakness. But maybe it's as time's moved on and organizational behaviors have become more sophisticated that actually, they're not always necessarily the ones that you want at the top. But I think it might also be to do with just good old experience and life. I would have always thought I was a massive extrovert, get my energy from people, and I don't know whether or not having children has probably put a slight tangent on that, because sometimes you're just done. And I often get my energy now from doing my garden, walking the dog, just having peace and quiet, because you are constantly giving. And going back to that, who you are as a person, I'm driven quite heavily by not necessarily a positive trait, being a bit of a perfectionist, having really high standards of myself and of others and of everything that happens. It's actually very exhausting and probably not that good. So actually, by the end of the day, when you're thinking, have I given everything to everybody? It's quite exhausting. And actually recharging it, there's nothing. And you're like, I just need to go and plant some bulbs or do some pruning or cut the grass, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Just have like nothing, and then you can come back in and be like, all right, I'm fine now. That's happened more as I'm older, whether or not that's age or just more in life. One of our dinner services spinning around.
Sarah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting, and I like gardening too. I never thought I would, but
God, it's a whole new life.
I think there's.
Oh God!
Well, I'm not got that far.
I'm missing out somewhere.
I think there's something about creativity and taking the time, and I would go trying to find that time for your self-care. I think is really important, but it's also interesting when you look at. I talk a lot about having diversity in the organisation, but actually being really quite clear to balance against the sort of women in the business and the sort of gender piece with. It's about diversity of thought and diversity of attitudes and characteristics. And we talk about having role models. And actually, for somebody that's an introvert, to see an introvert role model on the management board is as important as it is to have gender balance. And I think from a leadership perspective, something I've been thinking a lot about and trying to encourage others to look at is being, truly authentic and being yourself, but being open enough about it. So I think in the past we always used to hide how we were, and to the perfectionism thing, you could deliver this, and this, and you wouldn't want anybody to see a chink in your armour. But actually, I think now I'm very much trying to make it okay to say that some stuff is really bloody hard. Like, there's a lot going on, and juggling all these plates and spinning these things. Actually, I want people to know that, I'm having to go and pick the kids up, because if I do that, then that's okay for them to do it. And it's starting to spread that. So I totally agree with you. We've got to look after ourselves, we've got to look after each other, but we can do it by doing it loudly and trying to
I
role
heard
model it.
that expression. I heard somebody, and I think it was Karen Blackwell, and she said, I leave loudly. If I'm going to do kids' school days or go to pick up or take my mum to a doctor's appointment, I leave loudly, because there's no shame in it. And it's, the notion of work-life balance, it's actually a blend, because things are never, you can't always be in balance. You might have a massive project on or a huge issue that you're working through that will dominate your time, but that's okay in those surge points. But actually being able to level that off and blend in your family around that, or when it is appropriate to do so, rather than it being like, oh, I'm off balance, I'm 50-50, or I'm off. Actually not. It just all feeds into the same story.
I agree, and I call it calibration.
Yeah.
This idea of balance. You can be a little bit off piste on times, and it doesn't mean that you're going to fall over. It's just that you need to know that you are, so that you can come back from it. I think that there's those sort of like elements to it, which we're back to the self-awareness element. I love it as well. Your talk of diversity, Sarah, because I think that brings in what Lizzie, you were saying at the beginning, because different emotions bring diversity. That's the place for that conversation to be in. That, again, all emotions are relevant. Now, I'm not suggesting that anger where somebody's throwing chairs around in a meeting it's the right way to go, but to show up and say, actually, I'm exhausted today, or I'm shutting the door on this. I mean, I know with my teams where I am depleted, or in the past with my teams I've been depleted, and they always got a bit worried if I was quiet. But I was just like, I'm done. I just need a day where, as long as you're all okay and the world isn't on fire, I just need the day to myself. I'll be fine tomorrow, but I just
it's kind of like a fire break, isn't it?
Yeah,
like you
I've
just
got to
have
recalibrate.
To sometimes do that. And whether or not that's, that time is to do some exercise, take some care of yourself, or it is like get your house sorted out, and it's a really funny thing. It's what, for me, it's that being in control of things. And actually, if I'm not that, then it's that confusion of thought, and that doesn't help anyone in the long run. And Sarah, to your point around doing it loudly and saying, look, I just need that time, and or I mess this up and I need some help, or I don't know that, can you help me? And it's having that as a very supportive environment and a team. And certainly in my squad at work, it is like you're all there for each other, and we're based all across Europe, and learning lessons and creating that very safe culture to share, to learn, and to fail as well as succeed. Like that's okay, and we've seen good things from it. But certainly I'm here for that.
How do you? I was say, that's so interesting, because how are your team and your colleagues going to know you if you don't share that? As in, naturally know you and know how to support you if you don't share all of that stuff, or where you're at. Or we went through a period where we touched in team meetings for people to sort of say how they were doing, and it's drifted a bit, and maybe it's something that we bring back in the right kind of format. But just being open and honest, and I think Bobby suggested it earlier actually about, it's so exhausting if you're having to be more different people in different spaces, and actually just being yourself. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever said that I'm not doing a good job at what I'm doing. So if I just have to trust that that's the case, and then I bring everything else that I am with me, and this is, what's not.
Absolutely. And a plate spinning poppet can actually smash one or two every now and again. That doesn't mean that they are any less brilliant than they were the moment before the frigging plate smashed, in my view. And it's one moment in all of that. So there we have it. And I mean, we could go on for hours, but I did ask you to come to talk about the podcast a little bit more than a lumpy jumper. Now, Sarah doesn't even need to answer this question because I basically dictated to her in all my redness that she had to listen to the podcast. So I think I just need to get that. Yeah, it's just like, you will listen to, well, but there is something about the podcast that's kept her there, whatever it might be.
She's tracking me.
And
she's nudging me every now and again to make sure I'm listening.
I might say,
she's got the girls to tell.
It's like when I was speaking last week about and I just take a look to see how blank Sarah's face looked. No, I don't do that at all. It's just joyous that some of it has been listened to. But Lizzie, I mean, I know that I popped it, ta-da, here we are, have a look. You clearly did.
Yeah,
but to both of you, you're there, you've been listening to it. I'd be interested to know about your favorite episodes, but what keeps you listening? Let's start with what keeps you listening, or going back for a little bit more.
I like the dynamism, of all the different contributions. Like, in and of itself, I think it's just a highly entertaining and informative podcast, I think, for one. So bravo, Bobby and Bridge. I also think that the topics that you discuss and you touch upon are really relevant. Anyone that listens can relate to it. And, as a communicator, it's like, what's in it for me? It's a really easy and accessible way of taking away points that you can relate to. That's why I keep coming back.
Cracking.
Yeah, so obviously, you didn't give me much choice to start with, but
being honest.
I actually use it as a bit of a treasure trove and I use it as a bit of a tool. I sort of said to you quite openly, I said, I haven't listened to all of them, and I found every Tuesday a drop. I couldn't keep up because life got busy and it got in the way. But what it is good is there are times when I suddenly have a moment when I'm commuting or I'm doing a drive, and I say, actually, I'm in the right mindset to kind of do a bit of a reset, a refocus. I can think about me or about my leadership style, or I have that moment. And what's nice is that you can go and you can look at all of those different things and you can choose the right one, because there's now a lot of great different, diverse topics. You can choose the one that's right for that. So I think I picked one the other day that was before I was going to do a networking event. So I was looking at the intentional networking and thinking, okay, well, that would be good to listen before I go to this event. And then there were other ones that came up that actually just spoke absolutely to what was going on at the time, and you can just sort of sift through. And so I've been able to use that as a tool to kind of, when I felt like I need that bit of refocus or a little bit of time away from the, I say the day job, but I mean like the drumbeat of the requests or the answers or the content, to actually step back and go, hang on, how's my leadership going? How's this going? How am I looking after myself? And actually, am I feeling confident about what I'm doing and that kind of thing? So.
Oh, great. And I thank you last night, because Lizzie, Sarah and I were discussing it a little bit last night, that she's helped affirm something that Bridget and I are thinking of doing, which is basically almost like going back and doing I'm almost like doing my outro now, but this reassessment, reframe of some of our older conversations, because we know that we've pulled on particular threads and they maybe not finished them.
Okay, yeah.
So I think some reframing and repositioning and just going back over stuff again, that I'm hoping, Sarah, would aid and abet it being more of a treasure trove, because there's more unpacking to do on similar topics. So that's what we're thinking about for the next little bit, which is good. So the crunch question, and you will have heard on other guest gifts that nobody ever follows the rules and only gives me just one. So you can give me one, or that sounds really wrong. You can give me one episode or multiple ones as to what your favourites are. Sarah, it's your turn to go first this time.
Okay.
And we haven't collaborated on this one.
No, so if I could just steal your thunder by go. I actually think you've got strands that appear across lots of different topics, and there were themes that I think come across whatever the topic are, and I think that's could encapsulate sort of a lot of what you and Bridge say in different contexts. But one of the ones that I liked was about coping with overwhelm, and we've talked about this subsequently, saying no to more. You cannot do everything, and for plate spinners like us, that's very hard, and particularly if you're quite people orientated and you're a people pleaser too, that is really a real challenge. And so that's something that I think I need to re-listen to as well. And I think there's a second one which goes into a little bit more detail as well. So I need to sort of, it's something to use almost to keep reminding myself. But we talked about LOMO as well, and a love of missing out. And I think that is a really interesting space.
I'd like to do a whole episode on that. That came out, Lizzie, just to give you the context of it. I've just been reading a book by Oliver Burkeman called 4,000 Weeks, which is slightly confronting in certain respects about if you get to 76.9, that's 4,000 weeks. I'm like, holy bejesus. But when you put that bit aside, one of the things that they actually say about putting things down that you don't like doing is really easy.
Yeah.
But this JOMO, LOMO, the joy of missing out or the love of missing out, when you are having to let something go that you really love, but in that searching for calibration or balance or whatever it might be, that sometimes that has to happen. And Sarah and I were saying that, you know, JOMO doesn't have to be, nothing is forever. So it may well be that you have to put something aside at the moment, but then the plate can return.
It's sort of like from a mental health point, you know, that saying no to things or to people, you know, like if they don't serve you, and that can sound quite selfish, but, you know, putting down a friendship group that is just highly toxic and just makes you come away thinking that is, I feel a bit shit having had that time with those people. Put it down. Like, as you say, it's 4,000 weeks. And if you boil that down into one day you are closer to your exit. I know that I struggle with that sense of mortality, but it sharpens your perspective on things.
It's
like,
real.
It's real. Like, no one knows when that's going to happen. And ultimately, if what you are doing from the tiniest things, if it doesn't serve you or what matters to you, then don't do it. And that is very theoretical, and it's great, you know, you can say that, and, you know, we all have to probably still go to work, so you can't just choose to not work because that's not reality. Do you know what I mean? But how you approach things and how you look at things, and is that going to be your stress trigger, and are you going to get wound up by it? Well, you can only control how you respond to it, and if that isn't going to help serve you well, then you've got to think, you know, should you be doing it? Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's also, I mean, it's finding the time and the space to do that and having that moment to do that, because that takes you stepping out of what is right up in your face all the time. And I think that's quite hard to do, to take that reflection time. But I think if you do, it's really rewarding. There is.
I started coaching at the start of this year. I found a coach. And it was that element of investing that time per day. And it didn't 15 minutes, 20 minutes of journaling as well, you know, helping really reflect on who you are as that person and observing your true self. And actually, then that gives you a guide. It gives you your kind of like North Star. And it's true, like you sometimes think, I haven't got time to think about what I'm doing because I've got school runs and jobs and conferences. And then you get to the end of the day and you feel like an empty wetsuit and you think, oh, I can't do that again. But yeah, you do. So it is, you're absolutely right. Finding that time to actually step back and come into that bigger picture is really hard, but it is a mindset, isn't it? And it's just, you've got to keep training it and keep building it.
And it is practice. What do I say about 3,000 repetitions for it to actually be embodied? And I think sometimes when I start with coaching clients, giving them 15 minutes journaling a day, they think that I'm just about, that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. You know, so sometimes I might say to them 5 minutes, 3 minutes, but it's just the tiniest, even a stop for a breath to go, why am I doing this? You know, that doesn't take long just to stop. I mean, you're right, Sarah, putting it into practice is the longer level of discomfort, you've almost got to have the 3 minutes to actually spot it in the first place, because otherwise it is too close that you can't even see it.
And I think you collect your red lines as you go as well, right? You know, collect them from getting it wrong as well. I have
Absolutely.
some, I've not called it out that I've had to leave a meeting on time to get back, and I've raced for the train and I've missed a train and I've not got back in time for, parents' evening. I'm not going to do that again. That became then a hard red line that I then said to my bosses, I said I needed to go. It was my fault because I should have said, and I didn't, but I'm not going to let that happen again. But you learn from the mistakes.
Of course you do. Again, I'm reading another book at the moment. I can't for the life of me remember who it's by, and I'll put it in the resources, but The Right Kind of Wrong. And the fact of how much you get to learn from what would be perceived as mistake, failure. And a lot of what I'm reading is sort of like saying is the doing without thinking, without reflecting. And I think that the fact is that if you keep repeating it, then that's not the right kind of wrong. But when you rectify it, you've learned, and now you're doing something different. Then you sometimes have to have, as we said, the plate crash for something to change.
It's quite interesting. Even at my daughter's school, she's 5, they celebrate their mistakes. And I know that might sound a bit, modern day thinking and all of that, but actually it's okay to make a mistake because it's how we learn. We learn that either if it's the wrong behavior choice or, what it might be, we just don't do it again. And it's a learning, and it's reframing that as it's not negative.
I mean, that is the epitome of psychological safety in the school, if they are doing that with because otherwise people try and hide stuff. We see that all the time in organisations as well, because they don't feel safe to go, I've cocked up.
So
this has gone
Sarah,
wrong.
that talks to your point around being really truly authentic and doing
absolutely.
it loudly.
Yeah,
loudly.
And if you don't know, that's fine. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
If you don't know, you can't know everything. And you're not going to get it right all the time. So own it, be honest, work as a team, and then, then you pull those strengths and you support one another if, somebody drops a plate or smashes a plate.
Lizzie, favouritists.
Okay, well, I've got 2. The one about personal brand.
Yep.
As a comms and marketing person, I loved it because we've not long gone through a rebrand at work, and it dug into the values and the purpose and how she brought it to life, because we don't think about our own personal brands. And, you think of it, it's just a logo. It's just that it's not. It's so much more to that. So that spoke to me on a really kind of like professional and personal level. And I've actually got your quote as well. I wrote this down because I was like,
look at you two. Saboteurs.
You trained us well. You trained us well.
I did.
The Maya Angelou, the legend that is, and she always says, people forget what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And as a brand experience, if you're dealing with product or corporate brand, that is so driven, and that should just, in every touch point, having that as a philosophy, I think is so powerful. So I really enjoyed that one. And then, like I've talked about it a little bit today, it's Michelle Hartley who was doing around the sparking introverts and that personality style. I thought that was really enlightening to come across this notion of being an ambivert. And again, like I said, I think it's very exotic. There was one, and I don't know if this was a standalone episode or it was within one. It's like having fun at work. Having fun. Like, I think we forget to have fun and the power of play and actually stepping out of that, right, everyone heads down, keep churning. I mean, how much more creative and together as a culture you are if you're doing something that's fun. It doesn't have to be high octane. It can be over a lunch or a coffee, whatever. But as a concept, having fun, it's energizing.
It really is.
I don't think you guys like fun much, so try it out. But
yeah, I might give it a go. I mean, I am the one
dress,
that, Well, yeah, I mean, I have introduced fancy dress in a number of organisations I've worked in. Might try not to say the organisation, but although it become very clear, where there was a fancy dress thing going on during the Paralympics in GB, in the UK, and so we all offices were given a country to dress up as. And so I was dressed up as Ming the Merciless, with the whole beard and moustache and, you know, and what have you. And there was also somebody dressed as a sushi roll and Pikachu and a whole host of other random things. And I said, it'd be really good if we went and had a look at other people's offices, which took us through the main reception where there was a huge ceremony going on. And so I said, well, just, act it out. So I kept bowing to people as I went past, and all of these people bowed back. And we just wafted through. I thought, I am going to get fired. This is the moment. As they all were like, we got to the other end and through the doors, them all having had these serious faces on, like my entourage. And then they panicked enormously because they're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to us? I was just howling. I thought this is
Styled
so
it
hilarious.
out.
But we did get away with it. But yeah, nothing beats a good old
It's
laugh
fun,
and
isn't it?
a little
And
bit of antics. If you're not hurting anybody, I think it's sort of fine.
and I, even if you come out of your work time, and again, it's all very good in practice because there are only a certain amount of hours per day and minutes per hour. But even those little bits of, I mean, I try not to look at Instagram too much, but I do get stuck into these rabbit warrens of memes that just absolutely make me howl.
Yeah.
And I can just sit there on the train on the way home, maybe for 20 minutes, and I am crying with laughter. And then I get off and I go, I cannot believe I've just been laughing at whatever has been spewed up on my timeline. But it's great fun. And that's
Well,
that, And I just come off and I think, right, well,
cathartic.
it might just be one of those, but fun. Let's do more of that.
Fab.
Yeah.
So what topics have we missed, or ones that you thought, oh, you sort of like started, but you could have done more on, or anything that we've missed?
I think that there is a lot of really good content in there that I listen to, and so yes, absolutely, that's bang on, absolutely right, I need to do it. But it's something about how you maintain the boundaries or your intentions that you set for yourself. And that's quite hard because I think, and maybe this is to your point about you have to set it up as a practice, but I'm interested to know how long you've been managed to keep your journaling going. I think often we're spinning so many plates, and we're also saying that there's only so many hours in the day. But I find it quite hard to keep those boundaries as firm as I would like. And I find that some of that self-care time or that reflection time or that focus time that I have put in my diary, I give out to people all the time. And so something around how you can keep yourself honest and maintain those boundaries, I think would be very helpful.
Okay. It's like an integrity accountability check-in, isn't it? On yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice one. Lizzie, anything?
I like that, Sarah. I like that as a notion. Like, it's how do you put it into practice? It's all well and good. It's the taking action and just like the practical tips around it. How do you deal with that conflict between where you are now and where you want to be? And actually, I like that, Bobby, about the integrity point, like being held accountable and helping you hold yourself to account for not going to bed at 10. The small things. It's the brilliant basics that we all know in theory: drink water, move more, sleep more, read more, all that, without it then becoming like, oh my God, I'm shoulding myself again. I should be in bed and I should do this and I should do more yoga. The should is a word that we should, but working mums, working parents, let's say that, working parents, people who are pushing on in their careers. I don't know. That's my lived experience. Should is the absolute bloody nightmare because we always end up feeling inadequate or we're not doing it or whatever it might be. So I think it's that, how do we protect our own space, is a really good and would be highly valuable.
I think it's it's a great topic because it is about protecting your integrity, accountability for the things that matter. But I often wonder if what happens for us, because of course I know my children are at the other end of the spectrum to yours now in terms of ages, but having been there myself, and feeling all those things that I know that you are both in the midst of right now, is that I also think that should be taken out and shot and buried in a very deep hole. And I think what I did to myself, and I think that this might happen to many people, is it gets really prescriptive. So you've got to drink this many litres of water a day. You need to do yoga this many times a week. You need to journal 15 minutes a day. When in actual fact, if you were just, even as a start, to go, here is this 15 minutes and I can do anything in it. I can watch memes. I can stretch my back. I can drink water. I can drink water until I need to sit in the toilet for 4 hours, for drinking water for 15 minutes. But do you know what I mean? But you're not prescriptive, but where you start from is 15 minutes, which is entirely your own.
It goes back to knowing yourself. And actually, if you can have worked out what makes you happy and replenishes you, restocks you, then you can fill it with that.
One of the really key things that I've taken away from my own coaching going through this is that it never finishes. It's constant. No. And it's, the line that we talk about is like mindset is a skill set. You have to just keep training it. And, it's never going to be a linear up or linear down. But if every day you do something, and it might just be one thing.
Mm-hmm. My husband and I talk quite a lot about defining our own wins and defining what a win is. There are times when, I was on maternity leave and a win was at the end of the day, we were both still alive. That was a win. Yeah. If I had a shower, oh my God. And if I had managed to unload the dishwasher, well, I was winning. Absolutely on fire. But that was a win. It could just be that you have a good meeting and you have a bad meeting and, it's a score draw on a day. But, we say the same to our daughters. One of them's gone to a new school. Every day's a new day. It can be, and you start again. And I think, again, going back to this authentic self, it's permission to not be perfect, not get it right every time and just go, you know what? God, today's just a challenge. I'm going to go home. I'm going to start again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Michelle Hartley says 1% better.
Yeah.
But every day we are striving for that. And 0.5% can get rounded up. And I purport, when we're talking about how do you describe yourself, I'm a work in progress. And I will be until the day I die. Because no 2 days are the same. And I think that once you can actually get more into that, okay, I'll just try again. And of course, I still have days when I am, metaphorically beating myself half to death because something has not gone right. And I'm so cross with myself about it. That is in me. That is part of me. And then I remember to gentle up, and it's that. So absolutely that. So we're coming close to the end. Shout outs to people that you'd like to share the podcast with. Who would you like to bring along for the ride and a bit more play and listening?
My first one would be a very dear friend and a firecracker of a woman called Siobhan Brookman. My whole team. So they're coming. I've taken the liberties of, things coming through. So my whole team. Lizzie Mortimer, she's going to get a tag on this. And Sarah Furness, who is a lady that talks about uni-tasking.
Oh, yeah. And we didn't get into that. I think that I need to write that down as a whole topic as well.
So that's my tag squad.
Well, I'm also going to share it with my whole team, and so they will be hearing about this too. I might not focus on the episode that I'm on, but they can look at some of the others. And also the Women in BAT network that I co-lead. I think there's a lot of people, particularly on our board, that are phenomenal women with a lot of passion and a lot of energy. And we talk a lot about keeping that organisation sustainable, but them personally as well. So I think they are amazing, driven women and men. We've got allies in there too. And then I've got a couple of other close friends as well. So, Anna, who is a phenomenal general counsel who works very hard and juggles young people as well. And I think probably shares some of our plate spinning antics. And Alex as well, who was one of my bridesmaids, who similarly is in that same space. So I think them will get a tag from this too.
Oh, ladies, I hardly want this to finish, but I know that I need to let you get back to more plates. Otherwise, I can hear a lot of tinkling crockery going on if I'm not careful. So many, many, many thanks for taking the time to come and join me today. That was an awesome conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And it will be out very soon.
Thank you very much. So much for having me.
Thank you very much for having us both.
Thanks for listening to our final guest gift and final episode of 2024. We will be back in early January with something a little bit different. It's time for a trip down memory lane, where Bridge and I have picked 6 past episodes to reconsider, rethink, reflect upon, reposition and reframe if necessary. The experiment? What happens to a discussion when you go back and listen again? What strikes you most this time? So why don't you come and join us to see how it pans out in being in a different space and time.